Part 1 of The Work of the Sisters During the Epidemic of Influenza, October 1918. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Wales. Work of the Sisters During the Epidemic of Influenza, October 1918, by Francis Edward TOURSCHER. Part 1. Gathered and arranged from reports of personal experiences of the sisters and contributed by request of the compiler. It will be observed that not all the parishes in Philadelphia are represented in this paper. This is due to the fact that no report was made of activities in the parishes omitted. The aim of the compiler has been not to advertise parishes or the work of the clergy, but to gather facts, to record the experiences and impressions of the sisters, and incidentally to record their personal observations of the symptoms of the disease and conditions existing during the epidemic in private homes and hospitals. Facts unrecorded are quickly lost in the new interests of changing time. Incidents of personal experience, even the most touching and pathetic, pass away generally with the memory of those immediately concerned. We have little left now beyond mere material statistics and vague impressions drawn from paper accounts of the epidemic of cholera which visited Philadelphia in 1832. We know probably as much of the Black Death of 1348 in Europe or of the sweating sickness of 1529 in England as we do of the yellow fever which raged in our cities of the South and threatened the North in 1849 and again in 1854. It was this thought of gathering information for the future that first suggested the appeal of the compiler to the sisterhoods of the diocese, asking them to cooperate in this work. The second motive was to assemble facts while they are still a living memory, facts that will show what our sisterhoods are, what their place is in the divine plan of Christian society, facts which show what the qualities are of their practical love for brother men, as it is exercised daily in the parish school, in the academy, in the hospital, in the asylum, training our children to a Christian standard of life, bearing the burden of the weak and helpless, caring for the wrecks of the human family in moral and physical life. It has been no part of the plan of the compiler, who has gathered these details of information, to bring the sisters into the limelight of public notice. Self-advertising is alien to the spirit and the lifelong training of these women of Christian refinement, who have consecrated their lives to the work of counteracting that insanity of sin which is too painfully manifest in modern forms of feminism. At a meeting of the superiors and representatives of the uncloistered sisterhoods of the diocese held October 8, 1918, His Grace, the Most Reverend Archbishop, gave his hearty approval and encouragement to volunteer services of the sisters in local communities and mission houses in order thus to relieve suffering and to control conditions which were baffling the best efforts of the medical profession and city authorities in private homes, in general and emergency hospitals and public institutions. What some of these conditions were, what the suffering, not of the poor only, but of people of means who ordinarily command the comforts of life, will appear from accounts given below. These accounts were furnished by request, and the compiler's aim has been to leave them substantially unchanged as valued records of personal experience and impressions which will hardly recur in a lifetime. For purposes of convenience and in order to present a clearer view of a great mass of facts, it has been thought well, where the membership of the sisterhood is very large, as the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart and St. Joseph, to class the materials gathered under two general heads. First, the work of the sisters in hospitals and public institutions. Second, their work in private homes. The former has received some notice in the public prints, reporting the efforts of organized charity and relief during the epidemic. The latter is a field of experience little known, to most readers unknown, but to the heart of the Christian most precious. In arranging the work of the several sisterhoods, the compiler has followed the alphabetical order, excluding all thought of preference or partiality. Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. The sisters chosen for nursing and relief work went from the Mother House, Cornwell's Heights, to the two city missions, 836 North Broad Street and Queen Lane, Germantown. The sisters who joined the community in Germantown were sent out for private nursing. Those who went to Broad Street were given the privilege of caring for the poor afflicted in the municipal hospital. The sister teachers at St. Peter Claver's School helped to turn the first floor of the school into an emergency hospital and gave their services there. 4 classrooms were turned into wards containing 10 beds each. The cloakrooms were used as linen and supply rooms, and the sisters' room as a diet kitchen and drug room. The experience of the sisters at the municipal hospital, as told in their report to the compiler, is interesting and pathetic. It reveals the heart and spirit of their work. Only the main points can be given of a full and really fascinating account. It was an impressive sight, writes the sister, to see at night a white-robed figure in the dimness of the light moving among the sick, the suffering, and the dying. Many an eager, "Sister, I want some water," "Sister, milk," "Sister, ice," was heard. In spite of the fact that a nurse was present, the love of their own was manifest. Many a soul nearing God's judgment would awaken and say, "Sister, where am I?" Then to the answer, "In the municipal hospital." "But how can I be? The sisters are here." Heartbroken relatives found consolation in seeing a Catholic sister at the bedside of their beloved ones, sick or dying. The first case described is that of a young girl 16 years old. Opposite her bed lay her dying mother and sister. Beside her lay her 3 little nieces, ranging from 1 to 5 years. They had just lost their father through the dread disease, and were about to lose their mother, their grandmother, and aunt. This young girl soon showed that she also was to be called away. On the night of her agony, she clutched the sister's hand with the grip of death. Her delirium is described, pathetic yet consoling. In her brighter intervals, she would imagine that she saw angels over her bed, and in moments of peace she would beg the sister to teach her the Hail Mary in Latin, for in heaven we must pray in Latin as all do. She died in great peace. In Germantown, the sisters worked among the colored people, the Italians, the others of God's poor. In one poor home, they found a mother and 5 children, colored, huddled together in 2 rooms. The father, weakened by the disease, met them at the door with a greeting of welcome, and the wise remark, as the sisters now recall with amusement, "Sisters, I have not seen such a scourge since Moses drove the Israelites out of Egypt." In this house there was no bedclothing, no fire, no food, no linens. As for dishes, there was a glass tumbler containing medicine prescribed by a doctor. All the patients were to take the medicine from this glass. When the sisters looked for the glass, they found it, on a chair, full of dead and drowning flies. There was nothing to do but go out and phone to the convent for home remedies, linens, food, and fuel. But when the fuel came, it was found to be impossible to start a fire in the stove out of repair. The sisters then begged hot water from neighbors to watch the patients and clean the house. They nursed these poor people back to health and left them comfortable and clean. The sisters in the emergency in St. Peter Claver's School had some very interesting experiences. 3 sisters were on duty here from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and 2 nurses for the day shift and 2 for the night. 48 patients were cared for in this hospital. They were white, yellow, brown, and black folk, and together with the plain American from anywhere on the map of the 48 stars, were representatives of most of the nations of Europe, and others from Asia and the West Indies. One poor Englishwoman deserves notice. She was earning her living by scrubbing at one of the large hotels. She had been sick a week, and having no home and no relatives, walked to Blockley to beg admittance, only to find there was no room. She then tried several other places before coming to St. Peter Claver's. Her remark, when she was finally put to bed and made comfortable, is characteristic of perseverance. "I knew God and His Blessed Mother would not forsake me." One afternoon, a Chinaman came begging admission. He was very sick and coughing up much blood. He could speak only a few words of English, but he knew the worth of $1. He had $3 with him, and in his extreme weakness, coughing up blood and gasping for breath, he kept a tight hold on the $3. Early next morning, before the sisters came on duty, he had a severe hemorrhage and died. The sisters were keenly disappointed at the loss of the quiet, gentle sufferer whom they could not prepare for baptism. The sisters were more fortunate in another case, where they succeeded in teaching a little colored girl of 14, who was deaf, enough of the truth of faith to have her baptized. The next morning they found that she had died. We found one of the patients, the sisters write, a little Jewish, desperately ill in the streetcar one morning on our way down. She was such an object of pity, alone, sick, in a strange land. We took her with us to the emergency. She was so grateful when told she could remain until she recovered, but added shyly, "I am not a Christian, I am a Jew. Will it make a difference?" Again and again she expressed to the patient in the next bed her grateful appreciation of the sister's kindness to her, for she was not a Christian. There was a little Ukrainian woman who never tired telling the sisters of her chillins. There was Peter, who saved all his candy money to buy WSS, and Rosie, who would soon go to school, and Johnny, only 2 years old, and Mary, the dear little baby, such nice chillins. One little girl had been picked up on the street by the police and brought to the emergency, though she probably owes her life to this fact. Even after she was reconciled to remain and get well, she persisted in her indignation against that fresh policeman, and if she meets him on the street, she'll punch his nose. One poor colored man imagined he was in jail, and though guilty, insisted on his innocence. "Dem police just grab a fella and slap him in here to make $1." Another colored man, in his delirium, imagined Sister to be his mother, and clamored unceasingly for a monstrous bill of fare. And a woman with a temperature of 104 wanted cabbage in her soup. "I does like cabbage, I sure does." Another man of color always wanted everything that any other patient had, so when he saw the third man in his ward anointed, he too wanted his minister. The sisters phoned for a Baptist preacher. After a time, the preacher appeared, armed with a big Bible. He seated himself at a safe distance and read long and loud from one of the epistles of St. Paul. Then he rose and said, "Be good and pray while you are sick," and went away. The sister remarks, "He meant well and did his duty bravely as he saw it, but to all who were not too ill to take notice, there must have been a striking contrast between this spiritual comfort and the last sacraments and tender ministrations of Mother Church." Sisters of the Third Order of St. Francis. These sisters have the regular charge of St. Agnes and St. Mary's Hospitals in Philadelphia and St. Joseph's Hospital in Reading and 22 schools in the diocese. During the epidemic, there were 532 influenza patients admitted to St. Agnes Hospital, 460 cases to St. Mary's, and 303 to St. Joseph's Hospital, Reading. These hospitals, besides taking care of large numbers of influenza cases, sent several sisters, registered nurses, to take charge in emergency hospitals in Philadelphia, Chester, Pennsylvania, Eddington, Pennsylvania, and Newcastle, Delaware. Registered nurse sisters. 2 sister nurses were sent to take charge in the Medical Chirurgical Emergency Hospital, Philadelphia, October 10 to October 26. 2 sister nurses were sent to the Municipal, Philadelphia, October 11 to October 28. 1 sister nurse was sent to take charge of an emergency hospital, Newcastle, Delaware, October 14 to October 26. 2 sister nurses were sent to Eddington, Pennsylvania, October 20 to November 10. 2 sister nurses were sent to take charge in Glen Riddle Emergency Hospital, October 9 to October 28. 1 sister nurse was sent to Chester Hospital, October 10 to October 25. Besides these trained nurses, sisters, teaching sisters, and others were sent for relief work as follows: 9 sisters at St. Agnes Hospital, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; 7 sisters at St. Mary's Hospital, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; 13 sisters at Municipal Hospital, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; 25 sisters at O Medico Chirurgical Emergency, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; 2 sisters at Pottstown, Pennsylvania; 12 sisters at Chester Emergency; 11 sisters at Newcastle, Pennsylvania, emergency, 14 sisters at Glen Riddle, Pennsylvania, emergency, 3 sisters at Ashland, Pennsylvania, 9 sisters at Eddington, Pennsylvania, 4 sisters at Mahoney City, Pennsylvania, 2 sisters at Minersville, Pennsylvania. During the epidemic, 131 sisters of this community assisted in relief work. 81 teaching sisters helped in hospitals. 57 teaching sisters nursed the sick in private homes. There are recorded 837 visits of the sisters to private homes and 393 patients nursed by the sisters in private families. Many remarkable conversions came under the notice of the sisters, also the return of Catholics who had neglected the practice of their religion. The hand of affliction, together with a few words of encouragement from a sister nurse, the examples of Christian charity and self-sacrifice before their eyes day and night, helped to renew the spirit of religion and brought back to Mother Church many of her erring children. Among the cases reported by the sisters was one woman who had been away from the sacrament 16 years. She died a happy death. Another man had not received the sacraments for 20 years. Still another had been disloyal to the faith and the Church for 12 years. The case of a woman is reported who had led a very immoral life. She made a good confession and died consoled with the sacraments of Holy Church. One man made his first Holy Communion on his deathbed. The sisters have reported 22 of these wonderful conversions and returns to the sacraments. They report also one adult man baptized, 10 babies who were dying baptized, 4 conversions to our holy faith. The services of the sisters helped to counteract much unreasonable prejudice which came under their personal observation. One man, a Protestant, whose wife and daughter were nursed back to health by the sisters, said to them that he would never again read or believe what he had been accustomed to read and devour in the Menace and other publications which live and thrive on raking muck. Letters of appreciation and gratitude were received from town authorities, boards of health officials, physicians in charge of emergency hospitals, and many private individuals. Sisters of the Holy Child, St. Edward's. 8 sisters of this convent were engaged in nursing and caring for the sick in private homes. The calls for help usually come from the priests of the parish, several from physicians, both Catholic and Protestant, and some from the neighbors who spoke in behalf of others in need. Sometimes a priest or doctor stopped the sisters in the streets, which were almost deserted during the first 2 weeks of October, and requested them to hasten to a particular place where help was sorely needed. 2 or 3 calls came from the health authorities over the telephone. The sisters tried to be helpful in any way and every way suggested by conditions and the needs of the afflicted sick and their families. They cared for the sick, prepared them for the last sacraments, washed and fed the children, cleaned the rooms, and did the general work of the house wherever it was necessary. The sights, writes one sister, were often very dreadful when we look back now. In one very poor little home there were 6 victims, father, mother, and 4 children, in beds in 2 small rooms. In one of these a dead child had lain for 3 days. It was impossible to get the services of an undertaker. In another home, the mother was stricken with the influenza, and the father crippled with a scalded foot, while 8 little ones, ranging from 11 years down to a very young baby, were utterly neglected. There was nothing in the house in the way of food, hardly a dish to eat from, no sheets on the beds, and no doctor had called for a week. The sisters returned to the convent for bed linens, soups, medicines, and other things absolutely necessary. The conditions of the place cannot be described, but the sisters persevered, every day facing and overcoming new difficulties. The children were at length able to get up. The mother was taken to an emergency hospital, where she died after a few days, and the 3 youngest babies were sent to a home. It was pathetic to see how hard the other children tried to manage for the next 5 or 6 days, while waiting for a relative to come to care for them. The eldest girl watched for the coming of the sisters every morning to ask their advice, to tell them her griefs and troubles, and proudly show what she and the others had done to keep house. The sisters saw many families deprived of their nearest and dearest relatives within a few days, and many of the dead lying unburied for more than a week. There were, however, some bright spots in this dark picture. An old Jewish lady, whose daughter-in-law died leaving 3 little ones, was so pleased with the sisters' visit and care that she promised to have her grandchildren brought up as Catholics, and she said that she would keep her word. She graciously accepted the medals of our Blessed Mother, which they offered her. An old lady asked the sisters to comb her tangled hair, and as the locks were heavy and long, many hours were spent in this tedious work. The dear old lady invited the sister to come again in the afternoon to finish the task. In nearly every case, the people expressed their appreciation and gratitude for the services of the nuns. They seemed to look upon the garb of the sisters, the emblem of religion and charity, as an earnest of God's blessing in hours and days of trial. End of Part 1.